Hi, my name is Beverly. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm so glad to be here today. And Stephen, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for your reminders and being really clear about the directions. That's really helpful. I was taught a long time ago that if I take care of Alcoholics Anonymous will take care of me, and that's one of the ways we take care is by really being a good, true being of service to our meetings. My sobriety date is September 1st, 1984, so I will be 40 years clean and sober in September of this year, and I am deeply, deeply grateful for that. But I do want to share that was not a rocket to stardom by any stretch of the imagination. I came to my first meeting 8 years before I got sober, and I say that because it's important to know that we keep coming back, especially for any new people that might be struggling. It's also important to know that relapse is not a requirement, and many, many, many people get sober from their first meeting and stay sober. And so I think that it's important to acknowledge both of those. I love in the big book, it talks about the broad highway. And I like to think that there's a broad highway into the doors of AA. And however you get here, we're just glad you're here. I will share in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I was taught that it's more important to end on time than it is to say anything. I don't know about you, but I've been to meetings where I've been watching the clock and thinking, when is this guy going to get sober? And so anyway, um, so I had my first drink when I was 13 years old, and I just can't believe it. When I see 13-year-olds today, I'm just shocked. I'm like, oh my God, what were we thinking? Um, you know, uh, I started the pattern that was going to bring me into Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm a native Californian, but most of my family's from Texas and Kentucky and Indiana. But at any rate, my the boyfriend that I had, who was the surfer boy, dumped me, and I was crying and sad. And there was a beach party at a friend's house, and I went to that party, and a guy poured a tumbler glass of something called Red Mountain wine. Now, I don't know if they had Red Mountain where you are in good old Tennessee, but Red Mountain wine was $1.50 a gallon. Okay, it was cheaper than milk. Never saw a grape. It was just awful. And he poured this big glass of it, and I just drank it all because I was so sad because the boyfriend had broken up with me. And so it's he had all this pretty white beach furniture, and you can imagine what happens next. All that Red Mountain wine comes out. I throw it all up all over his pretty white furniture, and he threw me out, and I landed in the gutter. And that was the beginning of my drinking, that, and it doesn't get any better from there. I used to say, well, at least that was in Newport Beach. Newport Beach is a nice part of Southern California. And so I thought, well, if I have to be in a gutter, it's at least it's in a gutter in Newport Beach. I went away to college to Missouri, to a college my mother had gone to, and it was a culture shock coming from California. Um, and by now, I also want to mention that I was 13 when I had my first drink. I was also a heroin addict. So at 16, I had my arm out and was getting a fix of heroin. How does that happen? I don't know. But I can tell you that I was always fascinated by the dark side of life. I always wanted to know what's down that alley, what's behind that door, what are they talking about in there? And somehow or another, that's the direction that I went in. So I'm in college, I'm in a culture shock, and I married the local drug dealer. That was my way of getting out. I never ever thought things through. I didn't think about consequences. I didn't think about, do we have shared values, this guy and I? Do we have anything in common? No. What I think is just impulse. and I act on impulse. And that's the way it goes. And very selfish impulse, by the way, because I am an alcoholic, and selfishness and self-centeredness, we know, are a big part of the disease of alcoholism. But I didn't have language like that at that time, not at all. What I knew was I just what I wanted, and if you had it, I was going to get it, and that was pretty simple. The next guy wanted to come back to California, and he wanted to do silly things like finish graduate school. My feeling was, why bother? Why would you do that? Who cares? People would say to me, what do you do, Beverly? And I would say, I drink. I mean, you know, that's what I do. So now we're in Chicago. We go to California, then we end up in Chicago for this very prestigious scholarship that he got. And it was really fancy and very, very a big honor to him. But that doesn't mean anything to me because I just care about me. And so I decided that what I needed in life was a baby. And what I found out later with a lot of inventory work is that what I was really looking for was unconditional love. But at the time, what I thought was I needed a baby. Now, my husband said to me at that time, I am not ready for children until I finish school. But I have a listening problem. I don't know about you guys, but I hear what I want to hear. I don't hear what you actually said. So what I heard was, sure, a baby would be really fun. Let's have one. And that's not what he said. Okay. What he said was, I am not ready. So he told the truth, but I don't hear it that way because my reality has to be molded into what I want. So now I have a baby, and the baby's about this big, and I'm afraid of the baby, and I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't know. He's crying. He's doing this. He's doing that. My mother came. My mother was an alcoholic, and my father was an alcoholic. My mother died drunk, and my father got sober in AA. But at the time, my mother's there, and I'm afraid of the baby. And you can't say that. You can't say that out loud. It's the early 70s, and so it's the end of the hippie era, and everybody's talking about Earth Mother and all this kind of stuff. And I did not relate to any of it. So, what I do when things get mixed up like that is I pour alcohol on it. That's my answer. And so that's what I did. And now I'm a drunk mother of a little tiny infant, and all the secrets are mounting. I can't tell the truth. I don't know how to tell the truth, number one. And number two, you don't tell the truth. You don't say, I'm afraid of my baby and I need to drink a lot in order to handle that. You just don't do that. So it's getting really scary. And I'm coming out of blackouts and thinking, where's the baby? And going into it in the middle of the night to the nursery and feeling around in the crib, and his little legs are there. And I'll tell you, when that happens, I need a drink. And so that's the way it goes. I don't have an exciting drunkalog where I end up, in the middle of a Coke deal in Colombia or in the backstage of some great rock concert. No, I end up with my hand in my grandmother's purse. I come out of a blackout. We're back in California now, and uh, we visit my grandmother. My grandfather was a retired lieutenant colonel, and his last place to be stationed was the Presidio in San Francisco. He was a very distinguished gentleman. My grandmother was a beautiful Southern lady, and they were the only relatives who would let me in the house. I was really frightening. I think I scared them a lot. And I have to steal from my grandmother because that's just the way it is. Yeah, and in uh, in we moved again to the Santa Cruz Mountains, and you're not from California, but the Santa Cruz Mountains are filled with 2,000-year-old redwood trees. It's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely one of the most beautiful, magical places on the planet Earth. But I'm strung out on drugs and drinking every day, so I don't see any of the beauty. I have aluminum foil on the windows. I could have been anywhere because I can't let the light in. I'm up all night and sleeping all day, and life goes on like that. Uh, I used to drink with somebody named Carmen, and Carmen was a worse drinker than me. And it's great to have somebody who's worse than you, because if you have somebody who's worse than you, then you can point to them and say, "You think I'm bad? Look at Carmen." Carmen would fall down in the bushes, and we'd have to call her husband to come and get her. And it was great. I loved drinking with Carmen. And I didn't see Carmen for a few months. And one day somebody came to the door and rang the doorbell, and I went to the door, and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm just coming to, because again, I'm up all night, I sleep all day. I look terrible. I'm all sunken in, and just that look. And I answer the door, and it's a person that I don't know. And I say, "Can I help you?" And she says, "Beverly, it's me, Carmen." I was shocked. I said, "Carmen, what happened to you? Like something bad happened." She looked great. She said, "I've gone to AA." And I thought, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," because I'm losing my drinking buddy. What do you mean you've gone to AA? She says, "Yeah, I've gone to AA." Carmen had 4 months of sobriety. And that visual of Carmen being one way when I knew her and changing over 4 months. And if you see newcomers come in, we get, one of the beautiful things about AA is we get to really have the upfront and personal ground zero viewpoint of the newcomer coming in, and 30, 60, 90 days later looking like an entirely different person sometimes. And that's what happened to Carmen. Carmen carried the message of transformation, what the big book talks about, psychic rearrangement. Carmen carried that message to me visually by what I saw. And she said, "If you ever want to go to an AA meeting with me, I'd love to take you." And I thought, "No, I'm not going to an AA meeting with you. Are you insane?" But I said, "Okay, thank you." And I couldn't close the door fast enough. And a couple weeks later, I had a really bad night, and I was throwing up all night. And in the morning, I thought, well, I'm going to call Carmen. And I called Carmen and I said, "Okay, I want to go to a meeting with you." And Carmen was so excited. I thought she was going to come through the phone. And she was like, "Okay, that's great. So I'm going to pick you up tomorrow. We're going to go to a noon meeting, and don't try not to drink." And "What do you mean, try not to drink? It's the night before AA. Of course I'm going to drink. Okay." And so I was so hungover when she came the next morning. We had all these little gravel pebbles in the driveway, and every single one of them I was jerking and shaking. I was just, my nerves were ragged, and I was on edge. And we went to the Santa Cruz Alano Club, and it was by the ocean, and there was a fun zone across the way, with it was like the old kind of amusement park, and there was a roller coaster that went around every 15 minutes, and the Alano Club was on the other side of the highway, and the roller coaster would make the Alano Club building shake about every 15 or 20 minutes. But I was so hungover, I thought it was me shaking. It wasn't until years later that I realized, oh, that was that it actually did shake. It wasn't just me. Anyway, in that meeting, people were very kind. And I don't know how they knew I was new, but they did. And people came to me. And in those days, they would have little scraps of paper or whatever with their phone number on it, or we would put phone numbers on people on the directories, and people were doing that. And there were people at the literature table, and there were people at the, coffee, and they were chatting and talking, and they were speaking in complete sentences. And the women had lipstick in the right place. Everybody looked really good to me, and the whole thing was overwhelming. I needed a drink. It was just too positive. And isn't that weird? Isn't that just so alcoholic? It's too much. And I thought, this is way too happy. I don't remember anything from that meeting, but I have never forgotten it. And that's the important thing. And the message of the message of attraction rather than promotion. So I did not get sober from that meeting, not at all. And that started a long 8-year journey before I got sober. That was 1976. I didn't get sober until 84. And now I'm in that horrible thing. And if you work with newcomers, you know what I'm talking about. I would get 30 days, 12 days, 7 days, whatever. And I'm always new. In San Francisco, they used to have a 24-hour chip, and they would say, anybody else want to take a 24-hour chip? Beverly, because I was always new. And when you're new in the beginning, in the real beginning, everybody's really nice. Like, oh, you have a little boy, we'll babysit and we'll help you. And if you need a ride, 8 years later, they're just saying, good luck. Hope to see you next time. And that's the way it was. Uh, Not pretty. I was not a vision for you at all. I had a bad attitude. I was only going to AA to get the heat off. I had no intention of actually getting sober, but people were starting to ask questions. The school that my son went to was starting to call me. Now it's very foggy and cold in San Francisco. I love the weather there, but it's a different kind of a weather. The school is now calling me and saying, does Brendan have a jacket? Brendan is my son. Does Brendan have a jacket? He's 7 or 8 years old. What do you mean, does he have a jacket? Of course he has a jacket. Well, could you send it with him next time? Because so I'm so out of it that I don't even know. I'm not sending a jacket with a little child to a school. I don't know what I made for lunch. I mean, it was just awful. And when I look back on that, it's criminal, actually. It's a form of child abuse, that kind of neglect. And just awful, absolutely awful. And so it doesn't get better. It just doesn't. It just goes on and on and on. And isn't that just the way we are? Um, People tried to help. People were kind. Women sponsored me. Um, the men and women in the fellowship were nice and helpful. Um, and I just was a belligerent alcoholic, drug addict, and I had no intention of getting clean and sober. I took money out of the basket because I knew you would understand. I had to go buy drugs and you would get it. There's a place in San Francisco called the Tenderloin, which is just about what it sounds like. It's worse now, but it was terrible then. And I had no business being there, but that's where I was. So on August 31st, 1984, I had my last fix, pill, and drink. Um, I had called yet another drug program in a blackout, and they called me. It was Labor Day weekend, and they called me and said, we have a bed for you, and you can come in the Friday before Labor Day or the Tuesday after. And this is not to be dramatic. There is no Tuesday after. You know what I mean? It never ends. It wasn't that I was going to die. I was so toxic. I should have died. If I used the amount of drugs and alcohol in one day, if I tried to do that today, it would kill me. I mean, it was unbelievable, right? And I knew that if I didn't go in the Friday before, I wasn't going to go in. So on that Friday, I went into a long-term drug treatment program, and I had no intention of getting clean and sober for the long haul. Again, I was there to get the heat off. By now, I was worried about losing my son to the system. My sober father and stepmother took my son. They were down here in Los Angeles, and they took him, and I went into this program. And I tell the women I sponsor that wherever your feet land is where you're meant to get the message. I had a jail panel for 11 years. There's people who get sober in jail. There's people who get sober on this meeting. There's people who now, I have a Zoom baby. I never had a Zoom baby before that I got through the pandemic. But wherever you land and you start hearing the message, that is God. And I believe the hand of God picked me up from that one world and placed me in another. But I had no intention really of getting sober. Like I said, I just wanted to get my son back. I was in a bitter divorce, and I needed to get the heat off. So it was a long-term program, and I tell women I sponsor that wherever you are, if you end up in some sort of treatment program, do what they say, follow the rules, and stay as long as possible, because you need every minute of it for a foundation. So I was there for a long time. When I had 6 months sober, I had my first spiritual experience. And here's what happened. Oh, and I could get it in a minute. But anyhow, here's what happened. I went to the biggest meeting in San Francisco at that time was something called Tuesday Downtown. And it was at St. Mary's Cathedral on Gough and Van Ness in the city. If you're ever in San Francisco, that meeting is still there. There are about 700 people go to that meeting at that time, and it was a big giant room, super scary to walk into. And I was with a group of my little treatment program people, and we were on the side. And they called for chips. They give tokens for various lengths of sobriety. I had a million 24-hour chips. I could have played poker with them. I had so many of them. They were ridiculous. So I was 6 months, and they called 6 months, and I go up to the podium and I get my chip, and I'm walking back to my seat. And I remember looking at my chip and thinking, I'm really 6 months clean and sober. I didn't lie. I don't have a half a Valium in my shoe, or, a roach in the wallet. I mean, I am really 6 months clean and sober. And I remember thinking, I just might make it. I might make it. I never thought like that, ever, 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 ever. That is not the way I thought. And, in the big book, it talks about that there's this rearrangement that starts to occur. And that was what was happening to me, a transformation and a rearrangement through no effort on my part. I suddenly wanted to be in that meeting more than I wanted to be anywhere else. And that was a spiritual experience. I didn't identify it as that at the time, but when I looked back on it, it was like, where did that come from? Again, it's the hand of God. It couldn't have come from anywhere else that I know. So that was really meaningful. And by the way, I still have that chip, and it's more important to me than jewelry, really and truly. That was a turning point for me. And in chapter 5 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, we stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took. And my sponsor at the time said, we're going to be at a lot of turning points over time. And that was one of my very first right there. That was a turning point for me. And that was pretty remarkable. So I had a sponsor in San Francisco who had 4 years. I thought she had a million years. She seemed so wise to me. She just knew what to say and do. I had all these crazy problems, and she was just on fire for AA. And she had this little book, and she would keep track of all the meetings that we went to. And she'd go, okay, tomorrow we're going to go to this meeting. And then on Friday, we're going to go to this meeting. And I'd be like, okay, and I had gone to a lot of AA meetings, you guys, but I hadn't heard anything because I was drinking and using. And now I was clean and sober for real. And I was hearing everything differently. And I love when that happens. I go to a big book study, and that happens in the big book study is that I've read that book. I mean, I'm going to be 40 years sober, and I've read that book a lot, and with newcomers a lot, and women I sponsor, and I'll still things I'll read a line and go, wow, that is so profound. Anyway, that was starting to happen. So my son is down in here in Southern California, and I did not think that I could face him. I just didn't. I was not fun. I tell women I sponsor this also. People say, I want to get my kids back. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Families reunited is a good thing. But I was not ready. And neither was he. We had a very, very hard time in the beginning. And I learned from men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous who shared about being a dad again, being a mom again, what it felt like, what it was like, what it was really like, not the textbook, not the therapist, but the actual people on the ground going through it, talking about the guilt. And you can't parent from a place of guilt. My sponsor suggested that I do a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth step on parenting, and I'm really glad I did. I did that before I came back to Southern California. I said I was never coming back to LA. There's a big rivalry between Northern California and Southern California, for all of you who don't know. And, Northern California always wins. But this was where I was from, and my father was ill, and my son was happy in the middle school he was in, and my sponsor in San Francisco said, "You have no right to take that child back to the scene of the crime. So you're not doing that. You're going to him." And I did. I came here, and we needed a lot of help. My son and I, we got outside help, and I'm grateful for that. But and I made direct amends and living amends to my son. And the direct amends, I said, you didn't deserve 1 minute of that. He was 11 and a half when I got sober. I said, you didn't deserve 1 minute of that. And one day at a time, it won't be like that ever again. And I've kept my side of that bargain. And then for living amends, I was at every single basketball game and baseball game, and I was at all the practices. And my sponsor said, I said, yeah, but what about commitments at meetings? And she said, you can do that later. You're here for the long haul. Right now, you owe that kid. You owe him to be in the stands watching the next home run or whatever it's going to be. And I'm so grateful for that kind of direction. So I did that. When I was 3 years sober, my sponsor said here in Los Angeles, she said, not very many women can get clearance to go into the women's jail, and you can, so you should. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I've never been to jail. I never got busted for anything. I did a lot of bad stuff, but I never got busted. I said, I am not going into the jail. That's a terrible idea. And she said, well, I have great news for you. And whenever your sponsor says, well, I have great news for you, I call it sponsor jujitsu, She says, I have great news for you. The message is not, I went to jail. The message is, I used to drink and now I don't. And you can go. And I thought, that is so unfair. But I had that panel for 11 years. I just loved it. It was amazing. And it was downtown LA. The jail, they closed the jail, by the way. They opened up another facility. It was so old and awful. It was just terrible. And it was hard to get other women who could pass the clearance to go with me. So I had a sponsee, Helen, who was older than me, and Helen had clearance. And so we went, and I went once a month. And then Helen got breast cancer, and this was back in the late 80s and early 90s. And so it was, it just wasn't the same as it is now. There's a lot of treatment. Everybody's very open about it. But back then it was still sort of a secret and not a good thing. But she would share about it at the meeting and about her journey with chemo. And the American Cancer Society and losing her hair and all these different things. And I'm telling this story because we never know what message we're carrying when we do Alcoholics Anonymous. So many years later, the panel ends, and one day Helen calls me and she says, "You won't believe who just called me." And I said, "Who?" She said, "The sheriff's deputy, the female sheriff's deputy called, not because she was uh, one of us. She called because she had been diagnosed with cancer and she was scared. And Helen had shared about it openly. And she called Helen and asked her to be her buddy in City of Hope. And City of Hope, I don't know if it's everywhere, but it's a big cancer center. And so you just never know, what message are you carrying? Helen died a few years later of cancer. I gave her her 17-year coin in her hospital bed. She was surrounded by her family. So, 40 years is a long time. I've done a lot in the time that I've been sober. My son and I, mended fences. That took a lot of work. It was not, sunshine and rainbows right away, not by any stretch. He was angry and he had every right to be. Life with me was not fun. Okay. And so, I had a lot of work to do. Um, so let's see what else. I owed the IRS a ton of money. I never filed taxes because why bother? But I had a big job. I was an executive heroin user. But anyhow, that's another story. So I had a lot of back taxes that I had to make up for, and I got audited, and they fined me for the money I owed, and I was incensed. I said to my sponsor, "I can't believe they want to take my hard-earned money." She said, "Actually, they want to take their money back, Beverly. That's what's happening. You owe that money." And I was like, "That's so unfair." So I paid that off. It took 6 years, 6.5 years. And it was tiny, teeny, tiny little amounts in the beginning, and then it increased. And when I put the last check in the mailbox, I did have a spiritual experience. I did. I had, the promises are in the middle of the ninth step. And I had a sense of freedom. I knew serenity and we will know peace. We will know serenity and we will know peace. And I had a peace about money and about the IRS, and I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Another one of my favorite promises is that our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. And that happened to me also. My whole attitude and outlook upon life was changing. So the time goes on. I sponsor a lot of women. I had my sponsor is a woman named Pat Wood, and Pat is going to be 50 years in July, and I will be 40 years in September. And I'm really grateful for Pat. She's getting older now, and her husband is also sober, and she lives down in the Palm Springs area. And just this last weekend, a couple of my sponsees and I went down there to see her. And at almost 50 years of sobriety, Pat still has a H&I panel, and we went to a women's treatment program and carried the message. And I just love that she's still 100% in AA with a lot of time, and that's a great role model for me. I sponsor a lot of women, and the pandemic came, and uh, you know, uh, obviously everything stopped, and it was all of that, and suddenly we're on Zoom and all of that type of thing. And also H&I, which I love H&I still, but they were doing Zoom H&I. And so I signed up and I was on this Zoom meeting, and there was a young girl. We got there early because they told us to come early. We got there early, and there was a young girl, and she said, "Oh, you're my grand sponsor." And I thought, I don't even know you. And I decided, I'm going to do a sponsor family meeting once a month. My sponsees, their sponsees, their sponsees. We sometimes have 120 people on this meeting. People live all over the world: Colorado, South Carolina, Texas. I don't think we have anybody in Tennessee. Boston, Australia, London. all over California. And we come together I wanted to say, because when I was new, it was so exciting to go to somebody, if it was an anniversary or an AA birthday. We call them birthdays here. I know other people call them anniversaries, but somebody would say, "Oh, so and so's having a 20-year anniversary. We're all going to go," and it would be just amazing to see all these sober people. And so I thought, I just want to do that. So we have that meeting, and it's still going. It's 4 years later, 4.5 years later, and the girls keep it going. And that's really great. And it's a way of all of us staying connected. Of course, we go to in-person meetings too, but this is a way for the sponsor family to come together. And I'll just share a couple more things and I'll end it in 5 minutes. But uh, so, I don't want to be a curmudgeon old timer. There are curmudgeon old timers. I don't know if there are where you guys are, but there are here in Los Angeles, and I don't want to be one of them. And so, what does that mean? Well, this isn't the way AA used to be, and, da da da. Listen, I think it's wonderful to take care of AA the right way, quote, the right way. And I love that. And I am also very, very impressed with the young AA in Los Angeles. It is just vibrant and alive. I spoke at a meeting recently. The secretary was 19 years old and he had 3 years of sobriety. I was just like, wow, that was so great. And everybody was young and they were all really talking and all over the place. And then when the meeting started, they were quiet, they were attentive, they thanked the speaker, they had very good meeting habits. And I just thought, AA's in good hands. So anyway, during the pandemic, a young woman contacted me and she said, I want to get sober. And I said, okay, but we're on Zoom, so it's gonna be weird for me anyway. And uh, we started going through the book over Zoom, and she comes to a meeting that I go to, a Zoom meeting I still go to. And she calls me once a week and we have a half hour that we talk about stuff. She's coming up on 4 years, you guys. She'll be 4 years sober in August. And, she's my Zoom baby. And I just love that. People say, I don't know how you could get sober on Zoom. Well, they said that about jail too. They said, I don't know how people get sober in jail. And they do. Many people get sober inside. It's just, again, it's wherever you're meant to get the message. So the way it is for me today, in the last couple of minutes, I go to regular meetings on regular meeting times. I am all in AA. This is a way of life for me. I go to a great big speaker meeting, and then I go to a teeny tiny step study, and I have my sponsor family meeting once a month. I go to H&I panels like I did this weekend with my sponsor, and life is good. My son got married. He turned out to be a great guy. He's a great husband and a great father. They said, we're not going to have kids. And we said, okay, that's a choice people make today. 8 years ago, my grandson was born, and he is the love of my life. And I am a sober grandma, and I get to do all of the stuff that I missed when he was little, when my son was little, I'm doing with my grandson. And the pandemic was my friend because my grandson was 4 and 5 and 6. So I got to go see him every 2 or 3 times a week because the kids were working from home. It was kind of chaotic. And I became the babysitter, if you want to say that, or the nanny. And it was wonderful. And I got to really bond with my grandson, and I just adore him. And we have such a great relationship. And, I wouldn't know how to do that if I wasn't sober. And the reason I'm invited into my son's home is because I'm sober. And I'm so deeply grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous, to people like you, to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, to men and women all over the world who are carrying the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Thanks for letting me share.